Welcome, everyone, to Alliance for a Viable Future podcast. I'm your host, Lev Natan, and I really have a giddy, joyful feeling in my heart to be speaking with a brother, a friend, a colleague, a mentor, Sebastian Africano. He's the executive director of Trees, Water, People. It's a nonprofit that has headquarters in Colorado, um, but does work in Central America, South America, North America, the whole continent, I believe, and maybe other places as well. Um, but we've known each other. We were just discussing before the recording. We first met at Aprovecho Research Center, which is in Cottage Grove, Oregon. And it's a place where we were living and exploring, being curious about how to live on this planet in a good way. Um, Sustainable agriculture, forestry, appropriate technology. And um, Sebastian just took that experience that I only met you for maybe a couple weeks. And that was how many, 15 years ago?
February
Wow.
2005 or January 2005.
Yeah, 16 years ago. Um, and yeah, every time that I've just touched in with you, like, oh, what's Sebastian up to? It's just, you've just been taking that work that, you were already just, eating it up when we were there. And I was like, wow, how is this guy just moving through and learning about sprouting and just doing it every aspect. And then next thing I knew, you were down in Honduras, designing cook stoves, the rocket stoves in communities. And just, it was hard for me to keep up with all the different things you were doing. And it was so great to come visit your family a couple of years ago when I was able to be out there in Colorado. And so, yeah, and then, we had a conversation a few years ago when I was doing research for my master's. I think you had just started, or you were a year or two into this role as the executive director now of Trees, Water, People. So all that to say, you know, I wish we lived closer to each other, but it's so great to be here with you and spend this time together. And yeah, welcome.
Thanks, Lev. It's such a pleasure to be here and to connect with you. Anytime I get to connect with you is a good day.
Mhm. Yeah. So yeah, for those of our listeners who don't know what Trees, Water, People is, maybe just start there. What do you guys do? What are you up to in the world?
Yeah, so Trees, Water, and People was founded in 1998 here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And we were founded by foresters who really were after the idea of restoring the world's forests. One of them had done Peace Corps with his wife in Guatemala and had established a bunch of contacts in Central America. The other one had done a lot of forestry in the U.S. West, and they ended up meeting in D.C. at much different jobs than what really called them, and decided to just drop that, leave it all behind, move back west, and start an organization dedicated to planting trees. And that was the beginning of the journey. It opened up dozens of relationships with individuals and organizations throughout Indian country here in the West and the US, and also in Central America with civil society, community based organizations, all focused around restoring watersheds, restoring the environment, and and then improving standards of living for rural people. In most of those cases, most of the work was with rural farmers when we started out. And but quickly, very quickly actually, um, they connected the dots and saw that part of the reasons forests were being consumed or degraded was that half the world's population still cooks with firewood, with solid fuel of some sort, either firewood, charcoal, dung, or other. And so, apart from planting trees, they saw that they also had to help reduce demand for forest products, in this case, firewood, to also slow the consumption of those forest resources. And so they got into clean cooking, which is a simple way of saying transitioning a family from a campfire in their house to an enclosed, safe firewood stove that improves indoor air quality, but also reduces firewood consumption by half. And so we got into the household energy space that led into work in solar energy. It led to work on watershed restoration, agroforestry, agriculture, you name it. Anything that makes rural life more livable, because the phenomenon that we've been seeing since well before the organization was founded is that there's a huge rural to urban migration happening in the world, um, particularly in the global south, but not exclusively. And people are fleeing rural areas, and when rural communities leave those areas, they're the stewards, they're the people that take care of that land. They make the land productive, they produce in harmony with the land, and in the best of cases, they need the water that comes from the watersheds, and so they establish some sort of care and practice. And so when they leave, it opens the door to extractive industries that, or ranching that just clear cuts and to put a couple of cows on a grassy field where a forest once stood, affects water sources and kind of just feeds this vicious cycle of reducing carrying capacity of the land and pushing people to cities to find work because the land can't sustain them anymore. And so it's been kind of a long journey in that respect. We work in a lot of different themes, and but there's a lot of parallels between the work we do in South Dakota with the Lakota, the work we do with the Pueblos in New Mexico, all the way down to the work we do in the highlands of Honduras and Guatemala or El Salvador. There's a ton of parallels in the rural to urban migration story, um, and rural sustainability and carrying capacity of these areas, and we're trying to reverse that. So making prosperity possible in those rural areas, trying to generate income and sustainable economic development, um, and give these folks a shot that will prevent them from having to migrate, either to the nearest city, or across borders into the unknown, which we've seen a lot in the news lately. It all starts often in a rural area where someone decides that they can't feed their family, or they just lost their crop for the third season in a row due to drought or a hurricane, or all their seed went bad, and they have to make that first decision to leave everything behind, all their multiple generations of investment, and leave empty-handed to go live in an informal settlement next to a city or outside of a city. And that begins the cycle of migration and the depopulation of rural areas. And so we work, Trees, Water, and People, broadly to strengthen those rural economies and communities and give people a shot at thriving where they are.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Thank you for doing that work and being part of the team and leading the team that you're on. Uh, I'm curious, what's I like to connect the dots, like personally. What's at stake for you? Why is this work? Why has it struck a chord? Because it's not the kind of work that's for the faint of heart. So my experience is, I need, in order for me to do work that's challenging, I need to have some kind of personal investment. And so I'm curious, where's that connection to your own life, your own heart.
Yeah, a lot of it happened organically. My family's Latin American, so I was always looking to go spend more time in Latin America and work with purpose and to be useful. I think when we met, we were at the Aprovecho Research Center in Oregon, learning skills to be useful in the world, in a world that needed more sustainability practitioners. And so my focus in my adult life is, and a lot of this came from going to visit family in South America when I was growing up. And I grew up in suburbia on the East Coast and didn't know how to use my hands very well and build things and do things. I worked in construction and whatnot, but I'd go down there and feel utterly useless and helpless, right? And people would build things when they needed them and fix things when they needed them. And I had a lot of engineer cousins that could weld and do carpentry, and I was like, damn, I need to up my game and I start learning some of these things. And a lot of my family was foresters, so I actually went to Aprovecho Research Center to learn forestry, sustainable forestry, and timber production. And then was obviously into the agriculture and food production that they had there. And then there was this thing called appropriate technologies that I didn't know much about. But while we were there, you learn that these are technologies that are easy to, well, not easy, but are designed in concert with um, rural people with scarce resources um, to solve problems that you run into in rural settings. And so, we had a number of these technologies all around Aprovecho Research Center that we could tinker with. There's a lot of solar hot water heating, solar energy, solar cooking. A lot of it was based around solar energy, and one of those manifestations of solar energy is storing energy in wood to burn as fuel. So how can we make that process more efficient? The sun and the tree do it very efficiently, but then when the humans get involved, um, there's things to improve. And so we got into this world of clean cooking, and it was fascinating to me just because it was a process that required tinkering, required design, creativity. It required kind of collaboration with a cook and trying to solve or solve some of their needs and understand their needs, and creating a tool that would help them meet their needs in a way that was healthier for their family and also required less fuel, so less natural resource to produce the same result, to cook the pot of beans or to cook, to make the rice or to make the tortillas. And so it's just a cool set of problems. And I've always, been a tinkerer, and I've had engineer envy for most of my adult life, where I wanted to be useful and to learn to tinker with these things. And so when an opportunity came up to go to Latin America, which was one of my goals, one of my stated goals at that time, to tinker and be useful with technology and to work with people in the environment, it all kind of lined up. And so when you and I met, I was taking my first steps on this path 16 years ago plus, where all those things converged. And there had been a lot of work that went into getting to finding that path, right? And to identifying these were the three things that needed to converge for me to be satisfied with where my energy was going. And so I took the opportunity and went sight unseen to Honduras, to the capital city of Honduras, which didn't have a great reputation in terms of safety, or wasn't a destination. I don't have family in Central America. I'd never been there, never studied it, and just showed up. And that gave me tremendous purpose, to have to figure it out from zero. I had minimal, if no contacts, to when I started off, except for contacts that the organization had made for me prior. And this was an internship with Trees, Water, and People that started it all. So I, took an internship in a foreign country that I'd never been to, in an urban area, right in the thick of it, and challenged myself, to cut it and to be useful in that environment, and yeah, and that's been the rest is history, as they say, right? I had a great time. I went for a 6-month gig and ended up staying 4 years, ended up meeting my wife down there, ended up traveling the whole region, making lifelong friends and people who I consider family. getting to know history and culture, and kind of the roots of the circumstances that affect people to this day in Central America. And
Mm.
it's become my life's work to kind of try and alleviate some of the struggles that they have, as an ally, because there's not that many folks working on Central America at the ground level that grew up in a comfortable situation up here in the United States or wherever, like I did. So it was an honor to kind of be put in that place, and I knew that it was where I belonged. And even if it wasn't where I belonged, I kind of made it where I
Mm.
had to come up with a good result, and that launched a 16-year plus career that's still going strong.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful, inspiring, and yeah, thank you. It's wonderful. So, you know, I guess there's so many ways I could, you know, invite you to move forward. I think one piece what you just said that stuck with me is the relationships. Is the relationships, lifelong relationships now that you have down there, and also um, there is a sense of the connection between having those relationships and really understanding the roots of what we're dealing with, you know. And so I'm just curious, what's the difference between people, not people, but just someone's awareness, like myself or you, from the difference between having that direct experience and the direct relationships with people. There's a subtlety of awareness, I think, of the roots of what we're dealing with, that emerges through those experiences, as opposed to maybe just hearing about it or having a sense that there's something that needs to change. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, some of it, I think there's different ways to approach that knowledge and your relationship with a place or a people. And for me, it was both living it. I lived in a blue collar neighborhood in one of the most murderous cities in the Western Hemisphere. It was a rough city, but within that roughness, there was just communities, people living their life every day, going to work, getting it done, providing for their family, hustling with their two hands and the skills that they had. And this was before cell phones. This was before a lot of internet was available. And yeah, so part of it is just living it and just exposing yourself to the day to day and seeing how people get money and get their food and get their kids to school, against all odds, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other, right? um, they're not as concerned with the global historical perspective of why they're in their situation. They're just trying to survive every day. But the other part of it is me picking up every book that I could get my hands on Central American history, and especially Cold War, US relations, the civil wars of the 70s and 80s, and understanding that I was living in the byproduct of those eras, right? And the global politics, the banana republics, the colonization, the cocaine trade, all of that, in which the U.S. is involved in every chapter, had a direct and has a direct result in how Central America is today. And so on one side, I had the privilege of being able to look at it through that looking glass of historical perspective and academic thought, and just people that had studied the situation, reported on the situation, investigative journalists, etc. That really took that macro view, right, from way back. And at the same time, I was in it, right? I was living the micro, right? I was getting my tortillas every day, just like everyone else, from the lady down the street. I was, traveling cross town on a bus, through some of the most dangerous neighborhoods that people would tell me not to go to, or not to go through. And just challenging myself every day to kind of live and to stay stay strong and to not fold in the face of the hardship that I saw around me, and to understand at the same time that historical perspective and relationship and my responsibility as a U.S. citizen to kind of to see and feel what that felt like. And at the time I was also getting paid like $250 a month. I was on an intern stipend and surviving on that. So I wasn't living in comfort. I wasn't living well. I was living in comfort. I had a roof over my head and had a mattress on the floor. But I did my best to kind of plug myself into the reality that was being lived on all levels. So that was eye opening. Was a good experience. It was a really healthy discovery process, and also unhealthy at the same time because it wears on you quick.
Mm,
You develop a rough edge yourself, and you're exposed to noise. And it's a major metropolitan area with old diesel vehicles, so you're breathing heavy exhaust. I mean, imagine like New York or Boston in the 70s with no air pollution laws and no water pollution laws. And there's open sewage in the rivers, and there's diesel exhaust that you breathe every morning as you step out of your house, and there's noises of all kinds,
mm,
from welding and banging metal to brick shops. And I mean, it's an industrious place, and there's industrial, blue collar, hands on people doing work everywhere, all around you, all day, every day, carpenters. And
mm,
it's the sound of life happening, and people just trying to make it right. But that if you're not used to it and you're coming from, I mean, I was coming from the woods in Oregon. It's a lot to take in, right? And so
mm,
every day you got to just train yourself and just walk through it, one foot in front of the other. And and dodge the mangy dog that comes up to you on your walk to the bus stop, and the downtrodden alcoholics that were all my buddies that just stayed in the plaza drinking all night and ask you for money for their hangover every single morning. And people that are just dead broke and hungry that needed food and needed help, every single day. You learn to navigate all of that, but it starts to, it wears on you, and it brings you very quickly into both reality, and gives you a perspective of your place in the world, and also the privilege that we have on a daily basis, and that we can escape to. Because I could have left at any point in my journey and just gotten a ticket and went home. But I stuck it out for 4 years in the same apartment, um, through thick and thin and some crazy situations. But that was I left a master's program in the US to go to take that experience and to take that internship. And I got so much more education in the streets of Tegucigalpa than I ever would have in the halls of the university, right?
mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Um, so yeah, it just, but when I hear you sharing your story, I stuck it out. I was showing you this book, Common Fire, before we started the recording. And that's the kind of thing that is talked about in that book. I've been kind of studying it and want people to read it, because it's really, I've been watching this Netflix series. I usually don't get too into things like that, but it kind of hooked me because I'm a coach, and so it's all about sports coaches, like the best, different Doc Rivers, one with the Celtics, and the soccer coaches and tennis coach of Serena Williams. And it's like, whoa, these are, they're at the top of their game, and they're taking their, players to the top of their game. And it's like, okay, sports is very inspiring when people are taking their performance to that level. And for me, it's like I need a different, stadium or playing field, which where I really feel the impact, of the work that I'm doing. And like I want to be doing push-ups and learning skills that are, for, the future generations. And I know, or I have a sense that that's the kind of work that I'm engaged in, that lines up in that way. So that's the kind of stuff that's in this Common Fire book. And what I hear you talking about, it's like a similar thing. You're like in training. It's a certain kind of training. Like it's not training for the Olympics, but it's training for, being committed to the viability of our planet, on a, in each of our place, whatever, wherever I find myself, I'm just going to show up. And that's, like you said, I had this opportunity to line. I wanted to go back, to where my family's roots were, and then just go to work, be useful. And there's that yeah, that aspect of being on a team, maybe it's in the team of the common good, so to speak. uh so I just wanted to kind of presence that sense of identity, which is, it took me a lot, that's why I really love this book, because it really shows, there's lots of books, I suppose, or maybe there aren't, but this is one recently that really helped me to identify myself, like it's counter cultural in some ways to go after this kind of a purpose. Like I want to be um, doing social good work, and even and it's becoming less, thank God, less countercultural, right? There's a growing movement of it. So, but I just want to invite you, like, to name some of the ways that you've been able to stay in the game and keep, sharpening your blade and your skills, and whatever, what are the skills. There's like particular skills of, what it means to do what you did when you were in the field, and now as an executive director, it's different skills. So, but I'd love to just start with the skills of staying committed. What does it take? What has it taken for you? Like, kind of speaking in I statements, this is what it's taken for me. Like, I know I have colleagues, I have friends who are doing similar things. I'm sure you as well. So, but for you, what has it been so far? What are you learning?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was is really being on the ground and relating to people that I would have never related with if I had stayed in the U.S. And seeing their struggles and seeing their aspirations and being welcomed into their homes and sharing meals and sharing stories, experience, songs, whatever. But experiencing humanity at that ground level has always been kind of the driving force. Every time I go down to the field, even now from my cushy spot as a paper pusher at a nonprofit, going back to the field is really a reset and reminds me why I do this. It's the people, it's the relationships, and the commitments, right? I think that the first skill you develop is showing up. Showing up and showing up and showing up, and sometimes you don't want to. Like I wrote a farewell note one time because I was going into one of the gnarliest neighborhoods in Tegucigalpa for a week long uh, stint at testing stoves. Actually, it was several weeks, and yeah, we'd been kind of monitored by gang members, and I had to talk to gang members and kind of get permission and get in their good graces before I could show up there again. And so, it takes a lot to get up in the morning, have your cup of coffee, and say, I could be flying to California right now, back home to safety, or I could be going into one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the Western Hemisphere to do this work. And so, step one is just showing up. It's answering the call. It's going to the hard places. It's doing the hard things, and realizing that for you, it's an easy thing. Like I can check in and check out. These people live it every single day, so it's just that perspective helps. Of saying, um, I get to do this. They have to do this every single day. And so even, when it's a terrible, tough situation, like going down to Haiti after the earthquakes in 2010, I got to do that. And I could leave, right? Everyone there couldn't. and is still suffering the effects of those earthquakes, and and the policies that led to the complete collapse of society for years, decades before the earthquakes. But again, like I think it's reframing our day to day into I get to do this.
Mm,
That's step one. That's kind of how I always try to frame things for my staff and my team when things get tough, because sometimes it's a grind, it's tough, it's emotionally taxing and exhausting, but we get to do this.
mm,
And the reward is seeing the value of what you do in somebody's face, and somebody's response, and somebody's gratitude expressed to you in the field face to face, and having seeing that click of just like, okay, this whatever I just did or had a hand in doing is really helpful to people, and is really changing someone's life for the better. Even if it's just making them happy for a day or two, and then it just becomes rote and just a daily thing like cooking, right? And we install a new stove in someone's house, and it's a total sea change the first week, because the fire is enclosed. There's no smoke in the kitchen. They can whitewash their walls for the last time. They can stop smelling like smoke every time they leave their house and get on the bus. Um, their self-esteem goes up. Their kitchen's cleaner. Their kids are healthier, etc. But after week two, it's just I got to get up at 4 a.m. to cook breakfast for my husband and kids again, and keep the fire going for 16 hours. And so it just becomes a new tool, and becomes a new normal. But
mm,
you know that click happened. That click upward happened. And so that also helps sharpen your resolve when you see that, okay, all this effort and sacrifice that I'm making, which is small in comparison to the sacrifice that these mothers make for their children, or for their families, or these fathers
mm,
make for their children and their families. My sacrifice is small, but it it produces a tremendous reward or a tremendous benefit for someone, and that's being acknowledged, and that gives me fuel to do it again, and to find ways to do more of it.
mm,
And so going down to the field is a check-in every time I go, and it's a validation of just like, okay, I'm still on the right path, even if it gets it gets rote, it gets monotonous, it gets bureaucratic when I'm sitting in my office just responding to emails and putting out fires, pun intended, and solving problems, and just dealing with what it is to work every day in the U.S. to survive. It's gratifying, and it refills my tank to know that it's making a real difference in people's lives. That aha moment, that click, is happening every day because of the work that I'm doing up here. Because now I'm several steps removed, right? My day to day is raising money, right? And I'm responsible for keeping people employed and paying their paychecks, and also keeping them engaged and motivated, and really committed to the work that we do as an organization. And sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that when you're sitting in front of your computer all day, every day. Um, and so going to the field, engaging with the people, taking my staff down there, getting good content, photos, video from the field, hearing that gratitude come through the airwaves. Even we had a Zoom call with a community a couple of months ago, which was amazing. To close a project, and the whole community, rural Hondurans that didn't have any communication 10 years ago, is suddenly on a Zoom call where they're passing the computer around, and just saying thanks, to our staff and everything. So that's extremely gratifying to be able to make that connection. And technology has really changed the game in terms of how we can refill our tank. In the absence of the ability to travel like we had last year, we still found ways to connect with people, and remember why we're doing this work, right?
mm, mm. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a huge distinction that you're making. I get to do it, or I have to do it, and I think it reminds me of really it's an important I would say, yeah, one of the number one principles with any kind of solidarity work for when I think about, the issues of race that we have right now in the United States right now. It's like, um, you know, black people and people of color, native people, they don't have a choice but to deal with the uh, white supremacist, you know, overlay of everything in our country. And if I want to do solidarity work, I get to do it, in this country. So it's, in really any movement for justice, or, equal rights, and human, you know, uh, not just rights, but human dignity in our world, is, that distinction, I would say, applies, whenever we want to be in solidarity. It's a privilege. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
And then you also brought in, just working in the office now, and, pushing papers and writing emails, and, that has a whole different set of skills, and that are necessary. So I'm just wondering, as I said before we started the recording, you know, being an activist, or being someone that is contributing in those ways that you've shared all these stories. And now, making the things happen on the organizational level. What does it take? What are some of the basic organizational skills that you need as a leader of doing something, um, that's good for, social good in an organization? That's not so glamorous. How do you have what are your strategies? I'm a big fan of David Allen's getting things done work. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but it's like, there's a whole system, like, getting tasks done and projects, and not going crazy.
Right, right. I'm kind of an interesting specimen in that regard. I don't have a lot of systems and processes. I probably do, but it's kind of ad hoc, day to day. It's doing what I feel is urgent or as a priority, and being able to kind of. I'm not a list maker. I up until now, my memory is still good, and so I try to just cover my bases, and I have a mental priority list of things that I do. But a lot of it is just showing up. Again, it's showing up. It's and communication, listening. Um, it's kind of funny. We have this dichotomy at the house where I'm trying to keep my kids off of screens, but I'm constantly on screen, right? And because that's how I make my living these days, is communicating through email or through Zoom calls or through writing. We do a lot of writing, just communicating about our work to our donors, to funders and private foundations that give us grants, to the government that we're hoping gives us some grants this year. And so a lot of what I do is writing, communicating, and those skills um, are so vital and so critical. If you can keep up with those communications and keep up with the constant barrage of information, and carve out those insights, that's the skill that I think helps us keep moving forward. Processing information, pulling out the insights, using those insights to make decisions, and
Mm.
communicating based on those decisions, right? And it's a constant process, and it's a little bit messy, right? I mean, we have programs all over the Americas. We have donors in 50 states, and foundations, and institutional partners, and corporate partners, and then partners on the ground, communities, community leaders. I mean, we have the web of communication, and our network is extremely complex, and I know it very well just by virtue of having been in it for 16 years. But for someone new coming into my organization, it's always just astounding the amount of information that we manage, all the acronyms, all the deadlines, and the different styles of communication for different audiences is something that we're working on a lot, because um, you know different situations require different types of interaction and communication. And our job is as a listener and as an intermediary, really, because I have a cool diagram that looks kind of like the tree of life behind you, on its side, where we're taking information from one side and interpreting it to
Mm-hmm.
another side. So, for instance, we are in the field. We understand what's going on in a community. We're working with a local organization. They're expressing their needs or their aspirations or something they want to do or their challenges, and we have to communicate that in a way that makes sense to an individual donor sitting in our kitchen writing checks to her favorite charities, or a university partner, or a corporate partner, a business here in the US that funds our tree planting or something, or a government agency at the State Department, right? Or an officer at the UN. And so all of those different audiences require different types of communication, and need to know different amounts of information about what's actually going on. And so drawing out those insights, interpreting them for the appropriate audience, creating a successful relationship upstream to get funding to resolve that challenge or to do that work or to help the community reach their aspirations, and then reporting back to tell them what happened, right? So we're constantly in the middle of this communication stream, and it's really kind of a Zen practice of knowing where the different, conversations are at, and the tone and the language and the norms that are required for each different type of communication, depending on what you're trying to achieve. I mean, that's just an art learned over time, but it's critical to, especially in this past year where we've been staring at our screens for days on end, weeks on end, months on end, and you don't have that face-to-face human contact anymore. You got to get really good at interpreting what's going on and communicating what's going on in a two-dimensional space. So that's tough, and it just makes you hone your skills even more, right? If you want to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 It's the being the bridge, being the bridge in so many ways, and the translators. Yeah.
Yeah, the translators and the interpreters, right? Not just not of language, but conceptual interpreters and
Mhm.
translators. How is this going to make sense? How's the urgency going to be communicated or understood by the other side, right? The other party in this interaction.
Yeah.
When they're so far removed and don't have the benefit of having been to these places and seen these situations, and talk to these people and seen their struggles and their hustle. How do you communicate that just using words or just using a couple of images in a world that's got a very short attention span,
Mm.
and is very focused on what's important to them? So it's a lot of listening. It's a lot of interpretation on the fly, of intent, of need, etc., and a lot of skillful communication, and kind of digging into the meaning of things.
Mm. Yeah. So I'd love for you to just kind of connect the dots in however, whatever comes to you right now. I'm thinking about, you know the children, our children, and children that you see in villages and communities, and when my son was born, uh well, about a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half ago, I started thinking, oh, what's when is he going to be 10? When is he going to be 20? He's going to be 30, and what's it going to be like, when he gets there, for him and for all of his, fellow, babies who are babies now, and they're not going to be in 30 years. 30 years, right, it will be in 2050, right? There's a lot of science that that's pointed in 10 years and 20, 30 years and 2050. It's a big nexus point in terms of, climate, um, in carbon emissions. That's, and I'm not telling you, I'm sure, I'm just creating that shared,
Mhm.
focal point. And so, yeah, for you, connecting the dots, well, not for you, but for our listeners, and who are doing similar work, in regards to commitment, that they have that commitment, they have that sense of, well, I'm just gonna, go where I feel called, and go where I feel that my skills are useful. Um, and yeah, so how do you connect the dots between, what you're doing, and what, trees, water, and people, as an organization is doing, and the babies and the children who are going to be in their 30s in 30 years, and how is this, how are we going to make just be able to make it because of the work that you're doing, and within the big picture, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a tough
Maybe
question.
just cclose it up in the next hour. It's like that was a big question, but we just
No, it's a big
whatever
one.
comes to you.
It's because I think about it a lot. I think about what kind of world my kids are going to inherit, right? And the best I can do is to show them the value of hard work and the reality of how most people live in this world, right? And so, we travel. I've taken the kids to El Salvador, where my wife's family is, a couple of times. Emilio, we've been down to Chile as well. And in that, you try to expose them to things that they're not exposed to in the day to day, and in the places that we live. And so that's part of it. And I'm really grateful that my kids are growing up knowing where I work and what I do, and participating, and being in our community, and getting their hands dirty with us, and and learning what it means to be of service. That's real. But yeah, the no one can really tell the future, but just in the past 5 years, 10 years, I mean, the leaps and bounds in technology have changed completely what it's like to be a child in this world. um, Access to screens and access to the internet has totally revolutionized all aspects of our communication and consumption of information. We've seen how divisive it can be and misleading it can be. Kids don't fall into these traps. The traps are set for them, and directed at them to to get them thinking a certain way, right? And perpetuating conflicts in society, right? And so that's a big concern that I have. And then on the other side, the kids that I work with and see on the streets in Central America, right, or wherever I travel, they have unprecedented access to similar technologies, right? I mean, smartphones are available. So like almost every household um, has a smartphone, if not cell phones, right? And they're getting information through that, and kids figure out how to do things and play games at an incredible speed, so much faster than adults do. And so there's an opportunity, I think, for a societal transformation through technology, um, both in terms of agriculture, education, what have you, you name it. But they're also up against all kinds of odds. Climate change is so real down there. It stopped being theoretical decades ago, right? The In November there was two Cat 4 hurricanes that just steamrolled Central America and displaced hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people. That whatever they had built up in their life, generations of wealth were just wiped out, right? On people that are already living on the knife's edge of vulnerability, got pushed over, right? And they don't have anything to rebuild. They don't have anything to go back to. And a lot of kids are homeless, right? And just got their lives uprooted. And so this migration crisis that we're seeing of unaccompanied minors showing up at the U.S. border, I mean, those are the last strings of desperation. No one wants to send their kid on a 1,000, 2,000 mile trek or take them, right? It's dangerous. There's a lot of exploitation on the way, and there's little choice, right? There's no opportunities, or people, think that there's no opportunities, or come across the hard reality of having no way out and no way forward and no way upward, and want just like we do, a better future for their kids, so that they don't end up suffering the same way that they have in their life, losing everything, losing crops, losing farmland, losing their meager home and possessions. And so, migration is really that last gasp effort to provide a better future for the next generation. And it's such a tough issue, because on one side, you want folks to stay, and you don't want them exposed to the risks and the dangers of being on the road. But and walking through unfamiliar territory and hostile territory, right? These borders are being militarized. There's gangs and bandits along the way, human traffickers, unsavory characters along the whole route. And then you get to the US border, and it's militarized, and you're probably going to be in a cage for weeks to months, and there's no real clear answer of what's going to happen when you come out, right? And which side are you going to come out on, and what happens to you then. But imagine that being a better decision than what you have in front of you, right? A better option than what you have around you for your kid. Imagine that being the better option.
Hmm.
And that's the decision parents are making every day down there. So again, um, I'm trying to also train my kids to be useful, to learn the value of hard work. I'm not sure I'm being successful. The draw of technology and just like the weight of the world gets really heavy sometimes, and you want to protect them from that. But we have the luxury of being able to shield them from that, and letting them kind of escape into childhood, and letting them escape into video games and technology and the screens and everything that's available to them up here. But it's important that they also see and know that it's, a very similar kid, a couple thousand miles away, 4 hours of flying away is, or even down, in the nearest city, or even in your own town. Like here, we have kids that struggle with homelessness and hunger, but it's more easily hidden here. Down there, it's poverty levels are at 60% of the population, and so there's places where these choices don't exist. You're out selling tortillas on the street at 8 years old. You're not going to school, coming home and playing video games. You're helping your dad in the shop. You're carrying lumber. You're carrying bricks. You're mixing cement, right? You're learning to be useful. You're learning to be strong. You're learning to kind of weather the challenges of life. And you know, I need my kids to understand that as early as possible. We want to take them to live in Latin America, um, at some point in their childhood, so that they're exposed, and they have to figure out how to go get bread down the street, or go get some tortillas, or walk to school, and figure out a new language, and figure out just street smarts and survival of getting around in a new environment with a new language, new culture, and with different norms and privileges, right? And the absence of some norms and privileges that we're used to up here. I think getting out of our comfort zone and taking our kids also out of their comfort zone is some of the best education we can give them. Just like when I went down to Honduras in 2005, that was way out of my comfort zone, but it was the best education I've ever had in my life.
Hmm. Yeah. It's- yeah, I'm speechless. It's a lot, everything that you're bringing up. It's, you know, and it's important. It's what we need. It's what we need to remember, and to train again. It comes back to that training, for ourselves and for our children, to support a real awareness that's in our bodies, in engaging in real life, because like you're saying, it's so it's we're able to we have that choice, and where most of our human brothers and sisters actually don't have the choice. So um and is it even such a good choice, to turn off, right, to forget, so whatever it is, we do have the choice to remember, is what I hear you saying, and we got to hold on to it, in order to hold on to each other, and to support, our that there I do hear solidarity, that it's important, it's really important for our own development, as human beings, to be connected to one another, and understanding. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sebastian, for having this fireside chat with me. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's my pleasure, man. Anytime I get to do this is a great pleasure.
Yeah, so I'm sure we'll do it again too, down
Yeah,
the
you were there
down
at the
the road.
beginning, man. It's great to continue the journey and have you as a constant presence. Even if it's a couple years separated every now and again.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's just the conversation is always, it's always there, right? It's always, for me, it's this is, what fuels the capacity to continue to show up. Like you're saying, it all just starts with showing up. For me, it's I need to be, I feel more connected to you right now, and I feel more connected to, the work that not just, that you're doing, but that we're all doing, just by remembering and communicating about it. So yeah, thank you again. And for everyone that's listening, yeah, Google trees, water, and people. uh what's the it's just that's the
Yep.
website.
It's treeswaterpeople.org. Yep. And if you want to go to Central America, we also do tours. We take groups or individuals down to see our work, to be in these communities. And that website is twp.tours.
Nice, but I'm sure there's a link, right, in on the trees, water, people,
Yeah.
to that. Awesome. Awesome. Trees, water, people.org, and twp.tours.
Yeah. You got it.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to close for now, and then we'll continue on.
Right on, Lev. No, thank you so much for the opportunity. Cheers. Peace to the audience. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the spring.
Yeah, indeed.